The Nintendo Switch 2 is a great system, but it's just missing one thing to make it the ultimate Nintendo system. Before I talk about that, be sure to subscribe. So since the Wii, you've been able to play classic Nintendo games on Nintendo systems. Obviously the Wii had the Wii Shop, it had the Nintendo 64, NES, SNES, I think there was a couple other on there. Then 3DS and Wii U introduced Virtual Console, and that was all great. You'd pay a few bucks and get a classic Nintendo game. Then when the Switch came out, there was no Virtual Console. Then they introduced Nintendo Switch Online, where you wouldn't actually buy the games, but you would get access to all of them if you bought Switch Online. Then there was the Expansion Pass, which gave you access to more consoles. And personally, I still think this is a good deal. I think that you should have the option to buy the games as well, but for me personally, I like being able to play any of these games without having to commit any money to them, since I'm already going to pay for Switch Online. And now we finally got GameCube Virtual Console for Switch 2, which, even though it's very limited now, I'm hoping we'll get more good games. And this just leads me to believe that we're extremely close to the Switch 2 just being the ultimate Nintendo console. And what I mean by that is a Nintendo console that can play anything Nintendo, because there's still a lot missing from here. We have the NES, we have the SNES, Nintendo 64, GameCube now, even though it's limited. We have the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, but we're missing the DS, we're missing the 3DS, we're missing the Wii and the Wii U. And there's so many great games on all those systems. And unless those games have been ported in some way to the Switch, there's no way to play them. Imagine if there was a way to just play pretty much any first-party Nintendo game on your Switch 2. And yeah, I know people are going to talk about emulators. Like, you pretty much do this on your Steam Deck already if you have one, or there's a bunch of other things you can use. But for an official Nintendo console that's just more accessible to people, for having that Nintendo polish, they're only a few consoles away from making this have anything you can need as a Nintendo fan. Basically just 4 consoles, the DS, the 3DS, Wii, and Wii U. And I guess you could say like the GameCube now, since we have like 10 games and a few of them aren't even like that big of games. Because if there's one thing with Nintendo that is always true, it's that some of their old games can be ridiculous prices. Like, I haven't played a lot of the old Pokemon games, and by old I mean like before the 3DS era, and there's some I've wanted to give a try, but I just don't want to spend $100 on a game. And yeah, I could emulate it, but it's not as easy as just having it on my Switch 2, because my Switch 2 is what I'm going to bring around with me. Like, if I know I'm going to be somewhere for a while and I want to play a video game, I'm not going to carry around like my 3DS, my Switch 2, and my DS to decide what I want to play. I'm just going to bring my Switch 2. And if I could play anything I wanted to on there, there'd be no reason to play on those original systems, unless it's for nostalgia or for a game that's exclusively on there. Like, there will always be reasons to play on older Nintendo consoles. By that I mean more, won't really be a reason to just carry them around, because you'll have all the games you need on one system, so it would be the ultimate Nintendo console. And I've talked about this before, how these could work, because unlike other Nintendo consoles, like NES, SNES, they're pretty self-explanatory how they're going to work on Switch. Like, there's no gimmicks that you really need to worry about. Something like Virtual Boy, which I don't even know if I've talked about yet, is a gimmick, but we're still getting that on Switch 2, and I think original Switch, I could be wrong, but it's not too difficult to get these to work. So if we take a look at DS, we already had DS Virtual Console on the Wii U, and you just had different options for how you could customize the screen. You could have the gamepad like vertical, you could have one screen be bigger and one screen be smaller, so you had customization with that. For the Switch, I think there's a very easy solution for this, where you just turn your Switch the other way, and then you can use that touchscreen, and there would be like an attachment to use the Joy-Cons on there. I think that would be the simplest thing Nintendo could do. I think something more complex would be actually using a second Switch screen, like where you can use your original Switch as the touchscreen for it, and there'd be some sort of connector. I'm sure Nintendo could do something like that if they wanted to. That would obviously take a little more effort. And then the 3DS would work the same way, obviously. For the Wii, there was Wii Virtual Console on the Wii U, but I mean, the Wii U had a built-in Wii, basically, like it had the Wii menu. And again, that would be something very simple, because the Joy-Cons are just better Wii remotes in terms of functionality. Like, the Joy-Cons track way better than Wii remotes, so there'd be a lot they could do there to just make it work like a Wii remote. They could even make a Wii remote for the Switch. Now, the Wii U, I think, is the most difficult one here, because a lot of games on there required 2 screens, or had 2 screens as a big part of it. So the 2 ways to go about that would be using like an original Switch as the gamepad, and then having some sort of streaming where you're using it on the TV and your Switch connects and you control with that. Now, that could be a little clunky, just because that's just using 2 systems to play one game. And yeah, it could be the same thing with the DS and 3DS, but I think this would be a little more difficult for Nintendo to get working. but I think it's definitely doable. I don't think Nintendo would do this anytime soon just because pretty much every big Wii U game is on the Switch. Really, the only ones that aren't that have a reason to be on the Switch, I think, would be like Yoshi's Woolly World, Nintendo Land, which I would love to see that come back as a sequel, a couple of the Zelda remakes. Like, yeah, there's other games like this Mario Party 10, there's Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, but we don't need those on the Switch. Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, that's another good one. So I think that's probably the least likely, and I don't think anyone's going to be super upset if the Wii U doesn't come to the Switch, even though it's always a nice thing to have. Alright, so that's the virtual console stuff. That's pretty self-explanatory. Well, what more can the Switch do to be the ultimate Nintendo console? Something I'd love to see is more remakes of games that actually need it. Now, I know a lot of people hate quote-unquote remake culture, and I do too when we're talking about remaking games that are like 2 years old, like what PlayStation's been doing, where they are remaking games that just don't need remakes. But there's plenty of Nintendo games that could really use one, especially a lot of the Nintendo 64 games. Like, they have not aged that great. I don't want this to take away from making new games. I don't want these to be $70 remakes, but imagine Nintendo started like a new series where they'd be remaking classic games for like budget prices. That would never happen because Nintendo would never not try to make as much money as they can. But what if they made like Donkey Kong 64, like that fully remade, a remade Earthbound, a remade Star Fox 64, remade DS games? Like, what if they started a line to try to bring back some games that have aged like pretty rough, but they make them accessible for more people, and just try to make it so more of these classic games are now available to play like as better games on the Switch too? Now, I'm not saying I'd prefer this over brand new games, but I'm saying if this was something different, because Nintendo has tons of resources, if they wanted to make these games, it would not take away from them making brand new games. And we've gotten some really great remakes in the past few years. We got the Thousand Year Door, we got Super Mario RPG. Going back a little bit, we got the Link's Awakening remake. Like, I'd much rather things like this over just porting every single Switch game to like a Switch 2 edition, because I think that's completely unnecessary. Instead of that, just getting games that actually could use some reworking. Like, I'd like for, by the end of the Switch 2's lifespan, to be able to play basically any Nintendo game and have the definitive versions of most Nintendo games. Because the Switch 2 is going to be here for a while. The Switch 1 lasted 8 years. So assuming the Switch 2 lasts that long, like, it's going to be 2033 when we get the next console. So that gives Nintendo plenty of time to work with. Like, by the time this generation is over, the NES is going to be nearly 50 years old. So already, Nintendo is building towards this because we have the entire Switch 1 library. We have NES, SNES, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo 64, GameCube. We even have a couple third-party virtual consoles. So Nintendo is building towards this. I have no doubt that they'll have some sort of virtual console upgrade in the next couple of years. Like, if we're getting Virtual Boy, you can't tell me they're not at least considering Wii and DS. I do hope that they release games faster. I hope they release games they really should already have. Like, I don't know why we don't have like Smash 64 on Switch. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, to make this the ultimate Nintendo system, is just add features that are missing. Like, bring back the best features from previous consoles. Remember how much fun some of the Wii channels were? Even though some of them weren't the most practical, they were just fun and just gave the system so much more personality. Think about Wii, just think about DS, like with Picto Chat. Think about the Wii U and 3DS, all the things that they had. Like, there was Miiverse, there was the Playlog, which was on Wii too. There was those random mini games, like there was Face Raiders, there was like the Shorts channel, the Videos channel, whatever it was. And I understand why a lot of these haven't come back, with social media being more prevalent, with people having smartphones now. Like, when the Wii U and 3DS came out, people did have smartphones. Like, it's not like that wasn't a thing, but they weren't as prevalent, they weren't as advanced as they were today. So I understand why Nintendo hasn't done that. But things like the Playlog, things like themes, like, there's no reason those shouldn't come back. And themes especially, people gladly paid like $1 or $2 for themes on their 3DS. And I can't imagine it took many resources from Nintendo to make those. Just think about how many millions Nintendo's leaving on the table by not having that. Also with badges, like, that was something super fun that people spent way more money than they should have. Think about Street Pass. That's another big feature that I wanted to talk about. I'd love for that to come back. Like there's no green light like the 3DS, but what if they brought back some Meat Plaza games and made some new ones? Like, that's something that gave the 3DS so much personality and just made you want to bring around your 3DS. So imagine that came back on the Switch 2. Imagine all these things that they could add on the Switch 2 to really make it the best Nintendo console ever. Now, a lot of these things won't happen. Like, this is just my idea. This is just me talking about what I'd like to see. But let me know in the comments what you'd like to see. And be sure to subscribe for a lot of Nintendo content. As we go into 2026, I hope that there's a lot more Nintendo news, a lot more to cover. So be sure to subscribe to stay notified on that. Thank you for watching Game Domain.